Hey, so this is supabase, and this is my project that I've created already. You can see I've got a couple of tables already, but you're not going to have any here. So you're going to want to create a new one. So for instance, if we wanted flight data to be held in the database, which we probably do, we might include a flights table, give it a description of number of flights available. We'll just go with that for now, it doesn't matter too much. We don't want to add existing content because we don't have any curated data yet that we can import, but I think if you're making stuff in Excel, you might be able to, especially if you can upload CSVs. We're going to include a primary key here because we want a unique identifier of the flights. We want to be able to identify each flight. So we'll just keep the default settings here. I'm going to go over types with you shortly, but for now just leave it as int8, which is fine. So once you get in here, each one of these things here is called a column. And anything below that, the data in this table will be a row. Hence why we have the ID, so we can filter these. But that's more of a programming thing. So a new column. So we might want to include where the flight is coming from. So we might include from, where flight is leaving. And we have a bunch of types here available. For most things that you're going to be adding to this, is probably going to end up being text or varchar. The difference between those two things is text holds a string, which is basically text, whereas varchar, you can limit how much text is available for that data type. So you might have a varchar 255, which would be a maximum of 255 characters in that cell. So for now, we're going to leave that as varchar. We don't want to define this as an array. You're probably not going to use this for the most part, but yeah, so we don't want to set a default value. And we're just going to allow that to be nullable. If it was null, it would mean it would be an empty field. It might break things for now. So just leave everything nullable possible. And if you know of a default value, that's fine. But for most cases, you're going to be importing data from elsewhere, so you don't really want to set a default value. We don't need any foreign key relations right now because we can talk about that another day. So we've got our from, which is our varchar, and we might have a to. So where the flight is going. This, again, probably going to be a varchar. And then we're going to leave everything else as it is. So from to, we might include departure date, for example, when the flight is leaving. This probably is going to be a timestamp. This records the time value that it is currently, so it would be 11:34 for me. Timestamp, I think, is 11:34 and the date. Timestamp TZ means time zone, so that's just going to include the same data as the other two variables, but with the time zone appended on top. So we're probably going to just use the date feature for this one. Date is just the date alone. You can set the default value to be now. We don't want to do that. We want the default value to be null. If we set it to now, then the data that's already for each row that you insert here is by default going to be now, which is 11:34, or the date today in this case. So we'll just leave that as null and allow it to be nullable for now. So that's a rough example. Some other types that you might encounter. A boolean is basically a true or false statement. So you might have has departed, for example, and that might be a bool. Set that to false by default, and if it does go, then you could set that to true, which would be useful programmatically, but that's not the kind of thing that you need to worry about. This sort of stuff is the stuff that you might need to worry about. For the most part, I think that's going to be everything that you're going to need to do in regards to types and creating the table. But if you have any questions, then just let me know.